Ripped off and pissed off, coming back at you with the research that I promised in regards to the article my old school friend classmate sent to me about the length of the caretaking contracts and what that implication is, 25 years, 50 years, 10 years. So it turns out that the caretaking contracts very much depend on what type of model your body corporate scheme is under. Now, maybe I'm just stupid, but I'm pretty sure that most lot owners wouldn't, or purchasers, potential purchasers, wouldn't understand that there are different models for different schemes, and the different models allow for different residents within the complex. So harking back to my earlier video, I think it was one of the first ones I made, is that a lot of these complexes, particularly in Queensland, came up in the 1990s and were built for investment purposes. And the housing market has changed, and residents are now living, it seems, in schemes that were designed for those who are wishing to invest and for renters to be living in. So this is where some confusion comes in. So I'm going to go through it all with you as best I can. So I thought, what model's ours? I don't know. I have no idea. So I had a look. It took me a while to find it, and it turns out that it's in with the bylaws and that sort of thing. So the model that we have in our complex, and our complex is a 16-lot complex, we have an accommodation model. So what does that mean? So mybodycorpreport.com.au has got an article from 2015 which talks about this and talks about how the different models will affect the residents and the type of residents that are in the body corporate communities. So the article describes accommodation model as less regulated model, most suitable for predominantly investor owners. That's not us. We have, I think, maybe 3 rentals in the complex. But having said that, when I moved in 15 years ago, I think I was one of 3 owner-occupiers. So this is where lack of regulation is an issue, because as lot owners, if you don't get in, and I've been doing this for 2 days, so if you don't get in there and do all of this stuff, then you're not going to know, and I can guarantee you that your real estate agent is not going to tell you. Guarantee that. So because that wasn't us, we shouldn't be an accommodation model purely based on who lives here. So Steve, I remembered then that the article that Steve sent to me talked about the profit margins in longer contracts versus shorter contracts. And that made me think, because that then brings not only the developers, it also brings in banks, and it also brings in real estate agents, and it also brings in the caretaker with his ability to on-sell with all those factors. And I'll get into that for you. So first of all, I thought, what model should we be? Because we're not accommodation. So I did a bit more research. This article was very informative, and it was only credited to someone called Nicole. So I think probably she was, like me, a lot owner who had floundered through this process, and at the end of it realised that she wasn't properly educated, she wasn't properly informed, and therefore wasn't able to make a proper decision, and found herself stuck with something that wasn't what she wanted. So the standard model is defined as being a highly regulated model which is suitable for complexes which have a larger percentage of owner-occupiers, which is what we have here at our complex. Higher regulated, therefore the assumption is that all of the owners act within each other's best interests and for the interests of the complex in the long term, which is what I've been harping on about the caretaking and the maintenance and retaining property values within our complex, because everything is dying and you have to pay $200 a month so that you can watch everything die. So I don't think we're under the right model. Why are we not under the right model? Well, I could go on and on and on about how the industry is not regulated. However, it will go back again to my first video that these sorts of things, these legislations were written in the 1990s when the economy, the housing environment, everything was different back then, because let's face it, it's, you know, a cycle that we live in as far as the economy goes. And the way it's going at the moment, everything's getting more and more expensive all of the time. Things change. So whereas before townhouses were seen as an investment opportunity, they're now seen as a way for people like myself to get into good housing in a good suburb where you want to be, but for a smaller cost. Because, you know, I mean, I'm in Queensland, so our housing prices aren't anywhere near as ridiculous as what Melbourne and Sydney prices are. So I can only imagine the struggle that's going on there to try and afford to keep a shelter over your head and put food on your table for your family. But those of us in Queensland are being bound by laws that are from the 1990s. Now, these contracts for should only be 25 years at maximum for the on-site manager's contract. So I checked that, and yes, the on-site manager's contract is for 25 years, and the body corporate company, which is that collection of people at the top, that's a 50-year contract. So whatever that agreement is there, and I have it, I just haven't read it all yet, that's for 50 years. And then the caretaker's agreement is for 25 years. Now, why? Why have these long contracts? Because it is more financial for developers, for real estate agents, and for on-site managers, and for banks. So banks have actually put restrictions that on a management's rights contract that is 10 years in total, they will not lend money against that contract if there are 7 years to run. So you could buy in at a 10-year contract and after 3 years think, you know what, this is way too much work, but the bank would not lend a new buyer money because there was still 7 years left to run. Now, my complex is a 25-year contract, so the banks won't lend money on 25-year contracts if there are 12 years or less to run on that contract. So it is in everyone's best interest in regards to real estate development and on-site managers to keep these contracts as long as possible for buying and selling so that they can swap out, because they've got the longer contract, the 25 years V12. So it's a much easier prospect to sign a 25-year contract and get out before there's 12 years left to run than there is to sign a 10-year contract, which after 3 years you can't sell because no one will lend your seller money. That's interesting, isn't it? And anyone who knows me well knows I love a good conspiracy theory, and that's how this is building, people. This is building like a great big conspiracy theory between the developers, the real estate agents, the commercial agents who sell the management rights, and the banks, because they get to have a more secure investment option for the money that they're lending. I can't think of the right word now because I've had my head in a computer all day, but you know what I'm saying. It's a better prospect for them. There's more equity there if there's a default because it's a longer contract. And when these contracts are entered into in negotiation with the developers usually, and usually from my 3 years experience of working in real estate, and it was not commercial real estate, but I saw a lot of these complexes going up and they were all being sold off plan by a real estate agent and a developer. So when these initial lengths of contract are decided upon, there aren't any owners yet. So they don't know if it will be investors or whether it will be owner-occupiers. So they are actually making the decision based purely on how much money they're going to make from selling those management rights and possibly continuing to on-sell the management rights as managers come and go. But then they get the right to sell off the plan to sell the units as well. So the real estate agents are making heaps of money out of these complexes, particularly if they're dealing with overseas investors, and we hear so much about Chinese money coming into this country and buying up our property and driving up property prices. And there's actually a system in place that allows them to do this legally. Insanity. Craziness. So the other thing that occurred to me is that, do the politicians know this? Has the Minister for Housing actually gone, I wonder what's happening with that strata stuff that we did in 1990, and updated in the most recent update I have found is 2003. I wonder if that's relevant under today's housing crisis that is happening. I don't know. And the other thing, for all of you out there, I lived down in Victoria for a very long time, and when I lived down there, I heard a lot about how Queensland was so backwards. Well, here we are again, because guess what? Queensland is the only state in Australia that even allows 25-year caretaker contracts. Now, why? The Gold Coast. That is why. Because there's so much letting, student accommodation, that sort of thing that goes on down there. Even bigger money on the Gold Coast for these big contracts for buying and selling. More money to be made by the banks. So no one's calling for review. And I'm pretty sure the people at the Commissioner for Body Corporate office don't care. And you know what? It's not their job to care, actually, the way it's set up. So I'm no longer mad with them overly, because it's their job really to just enforce the rules. They didn't make the dumbass rules. The government did. And my suggestion then is perhaps the government's part of this conspiracy theory. Why else would they agree to allow developers to make decisions about what type of people are going to live inside of a new development before the development is even starting to be sold? It seems really wrong to me. Anyway, the other update I wanted to give you guys was in regards to the farm stock decision that we discussed the other day. I have tried to sift through the legal paperwork that is a decision made by a judge, and it was a bit too much for me. But I have reached out to the website where the Strata website that I was talking about that has lots of fact sheets and answers questions. And I heard from them today, and they have said they've received my question and they are going to look into it with more detail and get back to me. So I think that could be another interesting decision as well. The last thing I wanted to let you guys know is that I intend to write to my body corporate committee and explain to them about these different modules or models that we all fit under as body corporate living, and explain to them that we are actually in the wrong one, and if we get in the right one, if there's more regulation, we may well have more power. But I have both of those modules on my desktop, but they are as long as and read as exciting as an act. So you're going to have to give me a bit of time to go through those and compare what the major regulation differences are. But if you are a lot owner, if you are an interested party, if you're an investor, this makes a big difference to you as well. So perhaps have a look at your scheme, find out what is the correct module for your scheme, because I can guarantee you it's not probably correct, and most of them are just done as the accommodation model because that's where the money is. So again, conspiracy theories, love them, absolutely love them, and they're finding it, the information's just coming. I'm finding it coming. Everyone's involved in this, but lot owners aren't. So it's interesting, isn't it? Anyway, thanks again for listening to me. I appreciate it. I have a new petition. It was brought to my attention that the online petition that I was using had some technical issues. So I have changed my petition, and you will find the link to the petition in the comments or in my description for this video, because remember, I'm in my mid-40s and I'm still learning how to do this stuff. But I will try to learn how to get it on the bottom of the screen for you guys. I've got a video maker extension thing. Anyway, thanks so much and for listening to me ranting and raving and carrying on. The more I get into this, the more convoluted and confusing it is. If you've got questions or comments or likes, please go ahead and do so. Share with all of your friends, because there are people out there like me that are getting ripped off, and it is unfair. Thank you. Peace out.